We're an Instacart family.
Oh my goodness, we saved so much time with same-day grocery delivery.
So we joined Instacart Plus.
And now we're saving more money.
We get unlimited free delivery on orders over $35,
5% credit back on pickup,
and a family account to shop together.
Did you know members save $460 a year when they order at least once a week?
I do now. See how much you'll save. Visit instacartplus.com for 2 weeks free. Average savings exclude membership fee. Individual savings may vary. Credit back excludes alcohol. Paid membership auto renews. Additional terms apply.
Percolate on a particular mix of odd and inspiring news headlines in Wendy's Coffee House. Newsmakers with a penchant for the unknown, unexplained, and unusual share their experiences with UFOs, ghost encounters, near-death experiences, and more for your own unique blend of Wendy's Coffee House Curious. And now, here's Wendy.
A question. Have you ever met the baseball gods? I hadn't until I was sitting in a float center here in Kansas City at the Floating KC. And I've talked about that before. It was really worth sitting there just to sit. Floating is even better. And then I just happened to run into someone who is a contact for the baseball gods, and they are real. The book, Baseball Gods Are Real. And this is really a fantastic story. Many stories in one. It's a true story about baseball and spirituality. Jonathan Fink, he hadn't written the book yet. He was in the process of writing the book. And so he's in studio, which I don't get to do that very often. But this is so fun because it's here, you can hear the book. It's a real book. All right. And Jonathan is local, Kansas City. So if you're out and about in Kansas City, as a matter of fact, you might have even seen him at the Barnes & Noble doing his book signing. You'll recognize him because he's wearing the Royals attire, which brings the team lots of luck. All right. Jonathan Fink, hey, that was so amazing to see you and then know. And you say, oh, by the way, I wrote a book. Hey. And I'm like, I opened the book. Oh, my gosh. I was sitting next to Wendy. Okay. So congratulations. The book is a whole lot of fun, and there's a lot of great stuff in it. And now the even better thing about it is you're on a book 2 and 3. So congratulations on the first one.
It's so great to be with you. Thank you so much. It's surreal to be here. I'm a big fan of yours, and running into you apparently was no coincidence.
That's just incredible, too. I mean, and then when I'm reading the book and hearing about the story with your float experience. So this, for one thing, the Baseball Gods Are Real. It's a lot of different vignettes about Jonathan's life, his encounters. He's in Kansas City, an investment counselor. Is Satya Investments? Okay, and tell people what that means because I like that.
Yeah, Satya is a Sanskrit word for truthfulness. My feeling was when I started my new firm, I can't always promise good investment returns, but I can promise my integrity and my character and my honesty. Okay,
and that's helpful when you have a banker.
Yeah, I think so.
So right out of the chute there. Okay, so we meet there, and you, I don't know when exactly it was you had your experience, but this is why this floating thing is so phenomenal because you never know. Every experience is different. So what happened?
Yeah, well, I floated now 4 times. I met you after right before my first float, and I was actually very anxious to float. I was nervous. This confined space and floating in water. I was so curious to try it, but I was also very nervous. And I decided to do a yoga class right before I floated. Mm-hmm. And I come out of yoga class and I go to the lobby of the float spa and I see your husband. And so I said, oh, he must be a guest to float next. So I asked him, I said, sir, nice to meet you. Have you floated before? Uh-huh. And he said, well, actually, I don't float, but my wife does. Yes. And she's floating right now. And then, of course, you came out and we met. Each floating experience was very different.
Yes.
For me, the magic happened on my 3rd float. The 4th float was a mistake. I had coffee that morning. You're not supposed to drink coffee.
Yes.
Terrible mistake.
Yeah. You're too hyped. You're amped. You're like, woo.
Yeah, no good.
Okay.
So that 4th one was
a learning curve.
A learning curve. The first time you do it, it's so surreal and overwhelming and exciting that it really takes the first float just to get used to the experience. But it was a beautiful one. Second one was even better. I got into a really nice, deep meditative state. I was chanting in the water. You can hear your voice vibrating through you, and that was terrific. But on my 3rd float, that's where it was a true
surreal,
out-of-body experience. I have to say that's what it was. I can't describe it as anything else. But essentially, I got into a really deep meditation, and you sort of just kind of float, and then you just drift off.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially I had this vision where I felt like an angel.
Yeah.
And I was hovering in the clouds, above them and below them, and I was able to control my flight pattern. I was able to glide to the left and then gradually and gently glide to the right.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing I realized, I was floating over my hometown of Leawood, Kansas. And I thought, oh, this is pretty far out. I'll go float over to my son's baseball practice.
Oh, yeah.
And so I kind of floated over Leawood Elementary School, and I floated over the baseball field, and sure enough, there's a practice taking place, and I was able to hover in the clouds in left field and watch the game going by, and then hover to center field, and then hover over to right, and I really was consciously aware
Yes.
that I was not dreaming. It felt dreamlike, but I was in that moment, and I felt like an angel hovering over, and maybe for that moment I was channeling the baseball gods.
Well, it's like the Robert Monroe, the OBE stuff that I've actually talked with a few people about the out-of-body states, and that's what you're describing is what it's like, that real, actual being in that place and being able to visualize that. Some people also call that's a way of remote viewing.
Yeah.
So
I could tell you it felt absolutely blissful, tranquil. It felt divine. It really felt angelic. It was amazing. And for people who are exploring the spiritual path and are exploring meditation, I really would recommend floating very much. It's an amazing experience and a lot of fun, and you might learn a thing or two about yourself along the way.
Absolutely. And the coffee thing, that's what you learned. No,
big mistake.
This is
Yeah,
like relaxed.
big
Okay.
mistake.
With that, you also have done a lot of other things in terms of I've talked to you about meditating and doing mantras and doing all of that. First, let's go back to what is it with the baseball thing? Okay, how did the baseball gods come into play?
Well, I'd have to say that the term baseball gods, it's been around for a long time. I didn't invent it. I've always been aware. You'll notice that sports writers and announcers and fans will always refer to these magical, mystical, inexplicable moments that occur on the baseball field. And when we think about these miracles, we want to tangibly connect it to something, so we use the term the baseball gods. But frankly, if you're an investor and you pick a winning stock and it doubles, you might say it's the investment gods. Or if you're in real estate, it could be the real estate gods. The idea is that this intelligent energy that permeates all things, we can give it a name, we can give it God, we can call it whatever we want, but it's ever present. And but not until you open your heart and your mind to it. And then when you do, this energy flows through you and you're conscious about it, and then you see this divinity manifest in your reality. And so when it manifests in reality in terms of baseball, we give credit to the baseball gods.
Okay, and that's what this story is full of. These stories, these synchronicities. There is an incredible synchronistic flow throughout your life. And you have done a wonderful job of tying these loose ends together and bringing a common theme and really weaving it into something that people can relate to in terms of your little experiments that you put into the book. And one of them, we'll dive into a few more, but just to as an example, as you're trying to say, I'm going to do this, you happen to follow through, and I can't remember the experiment with the baseball card. That's like one of the very beginning things that
right,
says,
yeah,
this
that
is
was actually
real.
a spiritual experiment with regards to prayer. I grew up an atheist. I was not a religious person. I did not believe in the Torah, the Bible, the stories. And I think as a young child, I was kind of cynical and skeptical, and then I kind of went to this kind of angry phase.
Yes.
And anyway, I lost my train of
But he gives you the answers you want.
Right.
You're like, okay, if you don't have the answers,
Well,
then where am I supposed to go?
Yeah, well, when I hit a midlife crisis after moving to Kansas City in 2012.
Yes.
And, they say there's no atheists in foxholes, right? So I was at a point in my life where I really needed help. And I decided, you know what, meditation and prayer is a kind of a fine line. So let me try to pray. And I found that my prayers were being answered. I would first try with selfish things like a stock to buy, and I'd pray for it to go up, and then it would. And I'd be like, is that a coincidence? Am I just a good stock picker, or is that the baseball gods, or in this case, the investment gods? And then the more that I did it, the more that I found that the prayer is very real. It's very powerful. So as a mentor to my son, Nate, and of course, my daughter, Kayla, I'm always teaching them about all things spiritual. And one day we were walking out of Kauffman Stadium, And we just had another baseball God moment. I call these, whenever these little miracles happen, we call them baseball God moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what, Nate, maybe it's really a factor of all the meditation you and I have been doing. And now it's really kind of like karma coming back to us in beautiful, amazing ways. And I said, if you want to try to pray when we meditate in the morning, let's do a prayer experiment. And so we decided to do that. Now, Ian Kennedy, a pitcher for the Royals, he moved down our street, and so he was our neighbor. And so Nate was kind of, worshiping the idea of Ian Kennedy.
Okay, so hold on, because we're going to bring Ian Kennedy back into this because this is a little more involved. We have to take a quick break. Again, my guest, Jonathan Fink, and he's the author of The Baseball Gods Are Real, and you're going to love these stories. Stick around. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Thank you for checking us out. My guest knows all about baseball. Well, and a few more things. Maybe money. Yeah, as an investment counselor, that comes in handy. The background of my guest, Jonathan Fink, he happens to be in Kansas City. Leawood is now his home plate. And he also has a music background, and which I liked. He brings some of that in there because being in the radio industry, it's like, oh my gosh, music. And you would have been fantastic. And then you sidestepped and went somewhere else. But the synchronicity that goes throughout this book, you do not have to be a baseball aficionado to get this. The stories in here also involve some of the stats of the players and some of the big name players. And that's what I wanted to get back into before we go too far. But back into the Ian Kennedy. What happened with your son? This is a test.
Yeah, a great moment. My son and I had just had a baseball God moment. My son had a ball tossed to him by Mike Napoli, first baseman. And then after the game, Rajai Davis came over to sign some autographs, and Nate gave him the Mike Napoli ball that he tossed him, and he signed it. Mm-hmm. And then a minute later, Mike Napoli came out of the dugout, and then he signed that ball. And so it was the first time ever that my son had a ball signed by two different players. We thought, a baseball God moment. We're always thanking the baseball gods, and these beautiful things happen. We're walking out of the stadium, and we discussed the idea of meditation and how you can, from meditation, use prayer. Mm-hmm. And so we decided, next week, let's try a prayer experiment. And so Ian Kennedy's our neighbor. My son has always wanted to get his baseball card. And so we decided, let's go to the store. Let's buy 4 baseball packs. 4 is my favorite number, so I bought 4 arbitrarily, right? And we do a meditation. We do our mantra, and then we pray. And we say, baseball gods, spirit, divine guides, guardian angels, please manifest to prove to us that prayer is real, an Ian Kennedy card in one of these packs. And we had it on video. Open up the first pack, no Ian Kennedy card. Mm-hmm. Open up the second pack, no Ian Kennedy card. By the third one, my son's starting to get this look on his face like, Dad, this might not be working out. And I said, no, but we got to stay positive. We got to stay positive. We got to manifest. And so I said, well, there might be 2 Ian Kennedy cards coming out in that next pack. Third pack, no Ian Kennedy card. Now in the fourth pack, Nate opens it up, and in that pack was a Rajai Davis and Mike Napoli card. And I thought to myself, my goodness, we saw both those players last week. Both those players had just signed that ball of yours. What are the odds of that? Well, it turns out that the Ian Kennedy card did not yet exist.
Oops.
He had just signed with the Royals. His card would not be out to the next year. And so when, God, spirit, universe wants to show us miracles, I mean, I guess turning water to wine is certainly possible right from the get-go. But if you want to take a pragmatic atheist like me and convince them that these baseball gods are real, you have to create synchronicity and miracles that are understandable.
Yeah.
And so my mind would not have been able to handle when I found out that the Ian Kennedy card did not exist. If it had materialized in that pack, that would just blow my mind. But I could understand that, even being at the time still a learning spiritual person, but still being skeptical and trying to trust the power of all this. That was the best way to do it for me, because then I knew for sure. I mean, what are the odds these 2 players just signed the ball would be in that pack? It was an amazing experiment. So I thought that was a huge spiritual, successful experiment for sure.
Well, and part of it, too, is that your son is right there with you, and he's seeing some of the things you're doing. And that's what I think is so fun, because you have a visual and an application at the same time, saying, okay, it's going to be there. And then the funny thing is that didn't exist yet. So it's like, oh, yeah, that's the fine print.
Right. Small disclaimer. But my feeling is that, to me, it still was a very successful experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it showed that things happen. All right, now, the other thing about this is, let's jump ahead, because you've had some really cool encounters. One of them, the boy who,
The Boy Who Knew Too Much.
Yes, The Boy Who Knew I was going to say Who Knew Tomorrow. I think that's halfway name of a movie there. Okay. And this is a great story, all right? So for people who haven't heard.
Yeah, this is a very, very powerful story. several books helped me on my spiritual path and led me to ultimately writing my first book, The Baseball Gods Are Real.
Mm-hmm.
The last book in that collection was the book by Kathy Bird, the book The Boy Who Knew Too Much. And essentially, Kathy Bird was a typical mom living in California, a devout Christian, did not believe in things like reincarnation. And from the very beginning, when her son was born, he was obsessed with baseball, picking up bats and swinging them constantly, throwing balls after school. He actually had to wear a full baseball outfit, head to toe, to preschool every single day because he was so obsessed with baseball. And so at first the mom thought, oh, it's just kind of cute little hobby, maybe a cute little obsession. But then it got to the point where he started learning how to talk. And he'd say, Mommy, when I was a tall baseball player like Daddy, we didn't fly on airplanes, we rode on trains. You know, Mommy.
Wait. When I was a tall baseball player like Daddy. Okay, so
Yeah.
there's the first clue. All
right. And so she was, she dismissed it. Oh, he's just talking. And then he would say, Mommy, when I was a tall baseball player like Daddy, we played baseball during the day. They didn't have lights to play at night. And she'd be like, huh, interesting. Okay. And then she'd dismiss it.
Yes.
Then they'd be at a hotel and they'd be riding through an elevator and he would say, Mommy, yeah, when we rode on trains and played baseball during the day, we stayed at hotels and we rode in elevators just like this one. And then she's starting to say, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Now there might be something happening here. And so as his journey goes on, he gets older and he becomes, he's a lefty. He's got these awesome dimples. And she realizes that, maybe, well, of course, different people had different opinions on what was going on with this kid. Some people might thought he might be possessed. Some people thought he could have some psychological issue or who knows. It turns out it was much more beautiful than that. She realized that he actually might be the reincarnation of Lou Gehrig, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, who, of course, died by ALS, a disease taken after his name. And so her journey with her son it's a breathtaking, heartwarming story.
Extraordinary.
But the point for me is it blew my mind. And it was so inspiring that I thought, you know what? This woman, what she's done is brilliant because she used baseball as a vehicle, as a Trojan horse, to tell a story really about spirituality and reincarnation. And that's when the idea came to me. I have been experiencing these synchronicities, these winks from the universe, these God winks for some time. I've, as you know from the book, baseball has inexplicably revolved around my life and woven through my life. And I thought, well, maybe there's something like she's discovering that I need to discover myself. And so ultimately, the baseball gods had connected us. My mother-in-law threw a surprise party for her new boyfriend, Jeff Lewis, who happens to be a diehard Dodger fan. And she threw us a party for him at a suite at Dodger Stadium in August 2017. And so my son and I were having a catch in the basement, and the idea came to me that I should reach out to Kathy. And the reason why I wanted to was because I needed to know if this was the real deal.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that she was sincere, that she's not a fraud, that this kid is the real deal. Because if she is telling the truth and this kid is the real deal, it's a whole new ballgame.
It's massive.
Especially for someone like me who has, begrudgingly been willing to believe in this stuff. And so sure enough, we flew out to California and it was an amazing number of synchronicities. But ultimately, my son loves the ball hawk, which is to catch balls during batting practice or catch a fly ball or during, any way he can.
Yes.
Right. And so we were at the game early and I actually caught a home run ball off a very bizarre bounce. And I threw it to my son. It was a baseball god moment for sure. And then out of nowhere, my daughter, who had been on the tour with us throughout the stadium, they get to the suite where the party's going to be at, and it was Suite 231. And she FaceTimes me and says, "Daddy," and she shows me a picture of the wall, and on the wall is a picture of Christian throwing out the first pitch at Dodger Stadium when he was, I think, at 4 or 5 years old, which became the cover of her book. And apparently, the Associated Press had only charted 2 pictures for all of Dodger Stadium. There's, I think, 32 suites. So the odds that one of the 2 pictures would be in the suite that I'm going to be in about 15 minutes. And she goes, "Daddy, is this the boy you're meeting with tomorrow?" And I was like, "Sweetie, the baseball gods are real." And so sure enough, I reached out to Kathy. I said, "Kathy, have you ever been to Suite 231? She had not. And then I showed her the picture and her mind was blown. And that's when she knew that the baseball gods were bringing me to her.
Yeah.
And of course, the next day, my son Nate and I went to Simi Valley, California, and we spent the day with Kathy and Christian.
Okay, hold on. We're going to take a break because this is where it is so cool. And you're talking, I think he was 8 and your son was 10 at this time. Okay, so this is like a really cool young man moment. involving baseball and the gods and a whole lot more synchronicity. My guest again is Jonathan Fink. The Baseball Gods Are Real. You can pick up the book. It's at Kindle, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you want it. It's a true story about baseball and spirituality, and there are a lot of cool stories in here. And I don't recognize the names of all of the people, but I did like my page 83. 83. And he said he read my book. I'm like, I need to give you a book. So, okay, here we go. And that's a whole different story. So stick around. We're going to find out more. And keep an open mind. There is so much going on here. And if you want to follow synchronicity and see where it leads you, you might get your mind blown too. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Going to take a quick break here and deliver some news if you're listening on the radio. If not, hey, breath. KCMO Talk Radio. Baseball. There's just a sense of if you've ever gone to a major league game, when you're in the stadium and the sensation, the crowd, the ambiance. I used to always go, being in radio, to the opening day. That was one of the things where they treat you. You go out and do opening day. And so it was like a meet and greet, and hey, how you doing? They take you behind the scenes sometimes. But it was just that the camaraderie, the sense of belonging, even though you don't. You know your team, you know where you're going to sit, you have people that you see on a regular basis. And so bringing this to this story with the spirituality, the behind the scenes, the synchronicity, I think really ties up a lot of loose ends and brings people to the equation that might not have been interested before. So when you're talking about starting as an atheist, then testing out the prayer with your son and seeing, well, does this work? And then taking another leap after reading the book talking about the boy who knew too much, the guy who they believe is a reincarnation of Lou Gehrig, which is absolutely phenomenal. And when you watch the kid play, apparently the coaches all have a clue about this too. So you are going to meet with his mom and him and the Dodgers game. So setting the scene, here you are, you're all ready to go. What happens?
Yeah, I'll get into that. But real quick, you mentioned page 83.
Oh, yeah.
And you mentioned Lou Gehrig, who, of course, is in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I just wanted to mention that I received a letter 2 weeks ago that I submitted my book to Cooperstown, New York, to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and it's been accepted. They have an archivist and a library, and they collect baseball books. And so, Wendy, page 83, you're now in the Baseball Hall of Fame forever.
Oh, by default.
That's right.
Divine intervention.
You didn't have the pitch or hit, but you're now in the Hall of Fame. And hopefully one day Christian Haupt will be too. And so let's get into that. And so basically the next day, my son and I went to Simi Valley to visit Kathy and Christian. Now, Christian at 8 years old was already playing on 2 different all-star teams at 8 years old. And so we went to his second practice of the day, and for 2 hours, Kathy and I chit-chatted about book editing and writing, and she's turning her book into a movie, as I hope to do with my own as well. Mm-hmm. And the whole time, my son's just bored to death, watching baseball, wanting to be out there on the field. But as I'm talking to Kathy, I'm watching Christian. Mm-hmm. And I watch this kid pitch. I watch him play first base. I watch him field. I watch him hit. And I could honestly tell you, and I watch a lot of Little League baseball,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
He was the best 8-year-old athlete I've ever seen by far. By far.
And you said he uses the language.
Oh, he knows it all. We can get into that later on. But basically, so he played all day, and he was phenomenal. Just absolutely a phenom. And then when practice was over, he's covered in sweat. It's his second. He's been playing for 4 hours that day.
Yeah.
And we're in the shade with his mom, and he's just, I had not even met him yet. We met just briefly. Mm-hmm. And my dad says to me, Dad, a couple of the coaches and a couple of kids are still playing ball. Do you mind if I go out there and just shag some balls?
Your son?
My son. I said, Sure, go ahead. Just introduce yourself as politely. So he does. So I'm meeting, I'm with Kathy. I'm talking to Christian, and my son's out there just shagging balls in left field. Next thing we know, we hear crack, crack, crack. Someone's at the plate crushing balls, just hitting them like crazy.
Like, whoa.
And we look over, and it's Nate hitting. My son. And he is just crushing ball after ball after ball. And then finally, so many balls were being crushed, he got Christian's attention. Instead of drinking his cold water and looking at his mom, he turns around and stares at Nate. We all turn around, and as we all turn around, Nate hits one literally out of the park.
Wow.
Nate has never done that before. Christian had never seen anyone hit a ball out of that park before.
Yes.
And it was as if he was channeling
Luke. Or the Challenger.
Well, someone.
Yes. Yes.
And that kind of led to another chapter of my book, which was the Hank Greenberg experiment.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets interesting. Lou Gehrig grew up in the Bronx. He was a son of German immigrants. So he was a Christian, but he grew up around Jews. And in the 1930s, for example, it was not easy being a Jew in America. And in fact, Hank Greenberg did not go, I don't think, a day in his life without being verbally abused for being Jewish in the 1930s. But when you grew up in the Bronx, as Hank Greenberg did as well, with Lou Gehrig, Jews, Italians, they're all the same. It's no difference. We're all just people.
Yeah.
So he really didn't think of that any different. And what happened is he was, of course, the first baseman of the New York Yankees. And when Hank Greenberg was 18 years old, the Yankees recruited him. And he went to Yankees practice in the Bronx. And Hank plays first base. And he saw the first baseman, and he was so good that Hank said, no one's ever taken that guy's job from him anytime soon. And it was Lou Gehrig. So Hank eventually signed with the Detroit Tigers. Now, what happened is when the Detroit Tigers would come to Yankee Stadium to play the Yankees, he would, get a single or get a walk, and he'd be on first base. And so there would be Lou playing first, standing next to Hank, and then 10 feet over is the Yankees dugout, where all the Yankees are verbally abusing Hank, calling him terrible names. And Lou would hear all this. And so Lou and Hank developed a very special friendship.
Yeah.
And it's a rivalry, but there's very few people who'll even be seen taking pictures with Hank Greenberg in the 1930s, but yet you'll see many with him and Lou Gehrig. And so I thought, my goodness. And so after practice, of course, when Christian sees they hit a home run, Christian being very competitive, he says, I'm going back out there. So he'd already played 4 hours. Next thing you know, we're all out there playing. We played for a couple more hours, and then we've had dinner with them. And then my son and Christian basically became they were like kindred spirits, as if they knew each other from a past life.
Yeah. Well, and you said his mom was like a natural athlete, too, because she went out there.
Yes. And by the way, so was his father. His father played professional soccer for a couple of years in Hanover, Germany. So he actually has the DNA, the stock to become a great ball player anyway. But what's interesting is that Kathy nor the father were even baseball fans. He was a soccer fan, and she was disinterested in sports. Well, into sports, but not necessarily a baseball fan.
Right.
So his desire and love and passion for baseball was very unique. Well, so anyway, so that led to more stories in my book, because then I had to say to myself, well, wait a second, if Christian's reincarnated, I always thought that my son, I used to joke that my son is my reincarnated Grandpa Norman. We even named him after my Grandpa Norman. And of course, my Grandpa Norman, at age 13, he also grew up in the Bronx. At age 13, had a full-time job. His father had passed away. He had a mother and four siblings. He never got to finish high school. He had a full-time job, never got to go to college, never got to go to prom, never got to join a fraternity. He was always working. And he worked himself to death. And in his 60s, he passed away. And I always thought, my goodness, my Grandpa Norman never got to have a life that was enjoyable. He certainly never had to have a child that was fun. And then here's my son, who's maybe the reincarnated Grandpa Norman or Hank Greenberg, and he's getting to live this amazing baseball god life. We live in a beautiful suburban neighborhood in rural Kansas. And
he's talented.
And he's talented. And by the way, at 12 years old, he just made Kansas All-State. And so I have to, as my son, and in fact, in fall ball, my son's now he's 12, he's playing with 13-year-olds, and he was the leadoff hitter, playing shortstop. He batted .380 this season. And so as my son continues to get better and better and better, even though in the book I open up the idea that he might be the reincarnated Hank Greenberg, I can't prove it, and I always kind of I don't want to put pressure on him, or I don't want to go there. Yeah. But yet he gets better, better, and better, and I have to say to myself, my goodness, maybe he really might be.
What is the show? Hold on. Okay, we're gonna get into that. There's a quote in here I like. And it happens to be in the Hank Greenberg experiment, that chapter. In order to master the game of life, one must be able to master themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what you are really good at sharing with other people, because you have gone through and offered little tidbits of how these things might work. And there's a challenge you have with one issue. It's arthritis. Okay,
right.
So we're gonna get into that, because this is a real life. These are real people, real stories. I love at the end of the book you give the pictures so we can see you with various people that you talk about in the book, kind of putting names and dates and faces. The Ian Kennedy experiment. There's the cards. So we get it's just like you're going into somebody's living room or their whatever their life, sitting beside them on the sofa and saying, "Here's my story." There's a genuineness about this I really, really value. So, okay, so we're going to come back with this arthritis issue. Everybody has them, and it kind of surprised you. And so let's go back into that, because that's helped you on your search. So hang on, we're going to take a break. If you're listening, it's The Baseball Gods Are Real, the true story about baseball and spirituality. Okay, and this is the first book, all right? He's already given us a clue. He's got 2 more. And UFOs are going to factor into another one, okay? That's what got my interest. He's like, so this UFO thing, look, there's this, I've got another book. Okay, fine, potato chips. All right, so you're listening to Wendy's Coffee House. Check the blog. I'm going to put the links on the blog, Wendy's Coffee House blogspot. Back in a few, KCMO Talk Radio. Don't go away. KCMO, Wendy's Coffee House. The baseball gods are real, okay? And if you haven't met him yet, listen to Jonathan. You will know they're waiting. They will find you if you're really serious. Okay, the baseball gods are real. You can check out the Facebook page too. And then just with the stories, there are a lot of baseball topics, but you don't have to be fluent. He'll catch you up. The stories are, I think, what really is the big factor here, and the synchronicities and the little moments where things just all come into play, and it's just so beautifully woven together. And so we were talking about the Hank Greenberg experiment, and in order to master the game of life, one must be able to master themselves. And this one little bugaboo you have that you're trying to get a grip on.
No pun intended.
That would be arthritis. Okay, so how'd that factor in?
Wow. It's interesting. For so long, I used to think of my arthritis as a curse. It wasn't until I met you, Wendy, that I started thinking that it might be a blessing.
It's a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool.
My spiritual path is forced upon me through the arthritis because it creates suffering. It creates angst.
Mm-hmm.
And from that suffering and angst, you want to relieve that suffering and angst. And it's very easy just to go to a rheumatologist and just take a pill. But when you learn about the side effects of those pills,
the
side effects might be worse than the arthritis itself, right?
Yeah.
Getting lupus and cancer and all these different things. And so I've decided I'm going to pursue a holistic way to manage my arthritis. And ultimately, I am determined to cure it.
Mm-hmm.
I have to wonder if I've brought this from me from a past life in my Hank Greenberg experiment. We can get into that, but
yes,
maybe we should.
You talk about the past life, and I think that's relevant.
It might connect. But essentially, in my book, I talk about other spiritual experiments, and one of them I call the Hank Greenberg experiment, and I basically do a past life regression therapy session.
Mm-hmm.
And the theory behind that was, well, if Kathy Bird, in her past life sessions, was Lou Gehrig's mother, well, then maybe I was Hank Greenberg's father.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to explore that, and maybe some other things as well. And when I went to the past life regressionist, I saw Kirsten Harwick Mills. Shout out to her also here in Kansas City. She's terrific, and I recommend people to go see her. I said to her, Kirsten, I want to go to 1938. I want to go back to the Bronx, 1938. And she's like, oh, Jonathan, you silly Jonathan, you can't tell me or yourself where you want to go. Your soul's going to take you where you need to go.
Yeah.
And ultimately, my soul took me to my arthritis. It didn't take me to Hank Greenberg. I basically went back to a vision that I had where it was the 1800s, and I was a farmer. I was in overalls, and was wearing thick boots, and in my hand I had some kind of like farming device, a hoe or a rake, and I was looking out. I saw these wheat fields and these beautiful, beautiful sunflower fields as far as I can see, and there was a hill to the left and a little log cabin, behind me to the right. And it was sunset, and I was looking over this crop. It was ready to harvest. I felt this amazing, blissful sense of pride and joy. Being a farmer is a simple life, but it's a rewarding life. You plant those seeds, you watch it grow, and then when it harvests, it's a beautiful thing. And so I remember feeling this sense of pride and of joy, but yet my hands were throbbing in arthritis pain.
Mm-hmm.
And even when Kirsten took me to my deathbed in that life, I was a very peaceful death in my bed in this one log cabin. Through the window, I could see the wheat fields, the sunflower fields. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm having a peaceful death. But gosh darn it, my hand is still throbbing in arthritis pain.
I still have arthritis.
So I knew in that life I didn't cure my arthritis, but I also knew that I worked a life with my hands.
Yeah.
So maybe if you spent 70 years of your life working with your hands, you'd have arthritis too. But in this life, I work with my mind, and I talk for a living.
Yeah.
So why do I have arthritis? Well, one thing I learned is that maybe we bring on sickness and illness and disease because of our own dis-ease. The idea that some of our autoimmune deficiencies that come from stress or anxiety or anger, they can lead to manifestation in the physical body with all kinds of things, cancer cells or arthritis. And so when I first had some, sometimes your success could be a bad thing. I had so many clients as a money manager early on.
Yeah.
I managed so much money early on, and I had, just an overwhelming success. I was living in a state of bliss, but it wasn't until, a few bad ideas, investments didn't go well, I lost a few clients, that really ate away at my soul, and that created a lot of that stress. I also had, unfortunately, a secret sauce where I used to invest in profit from things that profit from the world's problems.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Okay.
Satya, now we only invest in companies that make the world a better place. But I used to be very cynical. That probably stemmed from my cynical nature with investing. But I figured, you know what? If we're fighting wars in Iraq and dropping bombs over oil fields, then buy oil stocks and buy defense companies. And if everyone's smoking cigarettes because they're addicted, then buy stock in tobacco companies. And the more evil the idea was, the more money it made. And so I realized, Gandhi said, you're either part of the problem, you're part of the solution.
Right.
And so I realized when investing is actually energy. When you're putting money into stocks and bonds, you're moving energy.
Fuel.
It's fuel. And so if you're investing in things that you actually consciously know, like buying stock in Monsanto that are creating these Franken stock, Franken crops. I mean, it's a really dark place. And so the worst part is that I made a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
And that led to more clients. And then the more clients that came in, I wanted to find even more doom and gloom ideas. And it wasn't until it started to manifest in my body that I realized I have to stop this. I'm going in the wrong direction with my career and in my life. And the arthritis is something that I now continue to pursue in curing. And by doing so, it got me into yoga. Yeah. It got me into meditation. I now get massage. I do reflexology. Yeah. I explore all these alternative ways. And by doing so, it continues. The arthritis actually forced me up the mountain of me.
It's a detox.
Right. It's forcing me. Yeah. I became a vegetarian at age 40. I'm now basically vegan. I have a couple of vegan vacations every now and then. I still love New York pizza. All right. But essentially, I live a vegan life. And I find that even though I haven't cured my arthritis yet, I definitely am better able to manage it. And I also realize that maybe I have to cure it on a more soul level.
On another, that it came with a purpose, that there was a reason for it, and it's part of the package. And I think, as you said, there are some things that you would not have tried if it wasn't present.
Floating, I would not have floated if it wasn't for arthritis.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there you go. You wouldn't have been out over,
and I wouldn't have met you,
the ballpark in Leawood.
That's right.
Okay, so with all of this, the next installment, I happened to post a thing about UFOs. You said, look, this is going to be my next book. And that, I think, is fascinating because there are these sports activities, and it's in one of your next books. So we only have about a couple minutes left, so give us a tease on that.
Right,
okay?
Well, briefly, the second book I just completed this past weekend, which is called The Road to the Show, also part of the Baseball Gods Real series. That second book is very similar to book one. It's more of a continuation of the story, focusing more on John Perrin, his traversing through the minor leagues and joining my company.
Which we didn't even get into.
Right. Well, that'll be for another interview,
Okay,
I guess.
that's all right. We'll
however, the original book that I intended to write, I never did because the Baseball Gods kind of took over.
Yes.
And these stories became so compelling that became the first book. But the original book was called The Religion of Baseball. And that is still, that is now the book I'm working on right now. And of course, in that book, it's all things baseball and spirituality, where I'm kind of this like forensic spiritual scientist, looking to continue to solve these mysteries on all things esoteric, spirituality, and baseball. However, with that, I will be exploring superstition and ritual and traditions and all things esoteric baseball. However, when you think of the history of baseball and how it mirrors American society, and you think about Jackie Robinson and Hank Greenberg and Fernando Valenzuela and Hideo Nomo, the idea that baseball in America is this melting pot where we all can come together. We still live in a world where there's a lot of hate and division. Just last week in Pittsburgh, there was a shooting at a synagogue. 11 people died, and it's just like, wow, I can't believe people are still so hateful. 4 years ago here in Kansas City at the Overland Park, we had a shooting. And the point is, Ronald Reagan once gave a speech and said, if an alien race came down to the planet to invade us, everyone on this planet would unite immediately, and we all become one. What you realize is black, white, Asian, it's all the same. We're all one. We're all the human race.
Earthlings.
And so when you find out that why are aliens showing up at Dodger Giant games, at baseball games in Canada, at soccer stadiums in Italy where 50,000 people in broad daylight could witness it, wow. There's something going on here. And so in the Religion of Baseball book, I will get deep into the religion and all things esoteric and spiritual, but then I want to take it to that higher plane and connect it to the greater universe. And for us to realize that actually this planet, this universe is even better than you ever thought.
See, it's just another story that he will not have time to share during this interview. Brilliant.
An absolute pleasure to be with you, Wendy. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. The book, The Baseball Gods Are Real. Get it and open your mind. There's a lot going on here, and it's definitely worth taking a little float to investigate. Floating KC. Thanks for listening. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio.
When things feel a bit chaotic, Instacart helps deliver milk and sausage. Add a little life to your cart. Get stuff from literally all your stores, from baby wipes to albacore. Add a little life to your cart. Instacart helps get your groceries. Your first 3 deliveries are free.
Download Instacart. Add life to cart. Terms apply.